Welcome to Capacity4dev Podcast Series, a space where development professionals share good practices and tips from the field and much more. I am here today with Isabella Olsson from LM International. Thank you so much for being here to share your experience with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, why don't you tell us about your work?
I have the privilege of leading the global advocacy work and efforts at LM International, which is a Swedish global development cooperation actor. It's a mouthful. And we are a self-implementing actor operating across the nexus with our own country and regional offices in around 30 countries worldwide. And although we have a big focus on the African continent, we are also present in the MENA region, Eastern Europe, and Latin America.
And Africa, particularly Sudan, is actually where one of the projects we wrote about some time ago on Capacity4dev has been implemented.
Indeed. We have been present in Sudan since the late 80s with local staff and several field offices, which I actually believe is one of the reasons why we are able to be present and implement projects like this in several hard-to-reach conflict zones. I mean, even now, given the tragic conflict that broke out in April last year, we are still able to operate in the country. We are present in several hard-to-reach states. In fact, we have actually expanded our response to a larger area to be able to respond to the ever-growing humanitarian needs we are witnessing right now, and in particular the large influx of internally displaced people caused by the war. And this is something I really want to highlight here because so many people are in need of humanitarian relief today in Sudan, and it's not something the media is talking about a lot. I mean, parts of the country is clearly heading towards famine. Most health services has been shut down. Over 8 million people have been forced to flee their homes thus far. And the list goes on.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible situation, and it's important. We brought it up in the context of this episode for sure. Going back to the article, why don't you tell us more about the project we covered in it?
Absolutely. It's actually another good example of what I've been talking about, namely the importance of local engagement and humanitarian access. So this education in emergency project that was funded by DG ECHO was created to provide safe, inclusive and quality education to conflict-affected and vulnerable children in Sudan, and in particular the areas of Central Darfur, West Darfur and South Kordofan. And I should also highlight here that it was collaboration between LM International Sudan and Save the Children Sudan, running between 2019 and 2021.
But, what about the challenges during the implementation period?
Apart from the obvious challenges of operating in a conflict zone, I think that one of the challenges that we could see after the final project evaluation of this particular project were that many children with disabilities in the communities were in fact not enrolled in school at all. Now, this is of course not unique for Sudan. This happens worldwide, but and of course this was also due to many things. We saw a lack of teachers, insufficient resources, and so on. But there was also a lack of community awareness or the community acceptance on the importance of educating children with disabilities or investing in educating children with disabilities, rather. And of course, interventions targeting children with disabilities and other vulnerable children only work when it's supported by the communities, which is the way it should be. So the need to support further community awareness and, more importantly, community engagement and, first and foremost, community ownership.
Yeah, so community awareness and ownership, as you said, but I imagine advocacy as well, right?
Yes, most definitely. And of course, this is really where my line of work comes in. And here I see local advocacy, or rather rooted advocacy, as an important tool to both raise awareness and to fuel community engagement and ownership. And what I really mean here is that all advocacy efforts must originate from the needs and priorities of the people and the communities that we collaborate with. And all efforts must, in addition, ensure that their voices can be raised, that their voices are heard on matters that affects them. This is obviously not something new. We all know that local communities know best, simply because they are the experts, if you like, in their own contexts. So in order to be successful, it is absolute key that local communities are involved from the beginning in both the identification of needs and challenges, and in the planning and implementation of advocacy and programming efforts, for that matters as well. With that said, however, it's important to point out that there can be many risks with conducting advocacy, and especially in humanitarian and fragile settings. So it's also very important to analyze the contexts and consider the risks, to find the right methods for the situation at hand in order to protect people and to do no harm, saving lives and upholding the humanitarian principles must, of course, always be prioritized. But that's a whole different discussion. My main point here is really that, yes, rooted advocacy can be an important tool when it comes to raising awareness and fueling community engagement and community ownership.
And I actually don't think that one can flourish without the other. I mean, we're currently seeing a democratic backslide where many states all over the world have either illegitimate governments or are moving more and more in that direction. And I think there's no news that, given this political landscape that we are in, we as development and humanitarian actors have no choice really but to become better at working with a more inclusive and local governance approach. I would say that it's only through adopting such approach that we can actually engage with the local communities to increase the sense of ownership, that we can actually reach community awareness as well. And I think that, I mean, in my experience, community awareness is not just the responsibility of the implementers, but also the funders. And I think in order to really tackle this challenge, it is very important that we do build cross-sectorial coalitions and that we collaborate and create synergies with, for example, the different EU delegations on the ground. And finally, I would also wish to highlight that lack of community awareness is often linked to mistrust. And I think that both implementers and funders have to be mindful of this mistrust. It is really our responsibility to acknowledge that it's not only about raising awareness within communities, but what is required is really a shift from the current unequal and misleading, North versus South narrative that tends to victimize communities. So if you ask me, it is about community awareness, but it is perhaps more about trying to work against this mistrust that has been built up by ensuring that communities are truly engaged and has a sense of ownership and are responsible for all programs.
That's a very good point, yeah. Last but not least, as a professional in development, what's your advice to colleagues working in similar contexts? Tough question.
It's a very tough question.
I kept it last.
I'd say make it simple, actually. First one would be collaboration. I mean, we have many implementing actors struggling with both capacity and resources. And the simple answer to that is really collaboration. To build more cross-sectorial consortiums with, like-minded actors with different expertise at the country and local levels so that we can grow stronger and work more better together to reach, more long-term impact. And that's a way of working that we use all the time at all different country levels. We build consortiums because that's how we reach and can scale impact. And for example, now, I mean, within EU Cord, the network that we are a part of within Europe, we are also looking into establishing so-called country forms in the countries to really be able to scale impact on a country level, where the countries, for instance, can collaborate when it comes to, applications, programs, and initiatives.
And then I think a second piece of advice would be an integrated and holistic approach to community service. I mean, even in a humanitarian setting, we have to think about how to integrate resilience in all programming, not only in the humanitarian response plans, but starting already with the emergency response plans. And I mean, taking the example of sustainable education systems within this project, 10 years from now, if we leave a community, how do we ensure continuation and sustainability? I mean, what will be important for this particular community in this particular context and in this particular program? Education cannot work in a vacuum. So how do we build in food security, access to water, peace and conflict resolutions, and so on?
I think that's all for today. It was quite insightful. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me.
Visit capacity4dev.europa.eu and join more than 10,000 development professionals worldwide. Share your knowledge, learn from others, collaborate globally.